Сайн байцгаана уу эрхэм үзэгчдээ. Манай Syndicate Talk нэвтрүүлгийн маань ээлж шин дугаар энэ удаа та бүхэнд Лондон хотоос хүрч байна. Энэ удаагийн дугаарыг Монгол улсаас Их Британи, Умард Ирландын нэгдсэн хаант улсад байгаа элчин сайдын яам, Монголын үндэсний олон нийтийн радио телевизийн англи төлөөлөгч Азаа студидтэй хамтран та бүхэнд хүргэж байгаа таатай байна. Тэгээ энэ удаагийн зочноор би маш сонирхолтой хүнийг өрсөн байгаа. Энэ хүн бол Nottingham Trent их сургуулийн английн профессор, доктор, Британийн түүх судлаач ноён Nicholas Morton хүрэлцэн ирсэн байна. Тэгээд нэвтрүүлгээ эхэлье. So thanks very much for accepting my invitation to be the guest of my interview.
It's my pleasure. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. So you just published and wrote this book called The Mongol Story, and I read this book and really happy, excited to know all the new facts and learnings, and also you wrote this book from the very different perspective compared to the rest of the Mongol study books. So then it is my pleasure to interview with you about this book, and it's a fantastic opportunity to explore the Mongol Empire's influence, especially in the Midland Near East, and also the global history. So I am keen to know what was the motivation to write this book about the Mongol study? What's your relationship with Mongols?
Yeah, sure. So my starting point for writing the book was mostly I'm a historian of the Middle East, but I was aware of just how big an influence the Mongols had in the Middle East and indeed the wider world. And the starting point was really seeing how many ideas, technologies, scientific discoveries were taking place in the relationship between the Mongol Empire and the Middle East. And I wanted to explore those. Its ideas, its concepts, its religions, its recipes even, and food. It takes so many different forms. And I wanted to look at how Eurasia as a continent was developing and the connections between people. But in particular, I didn't just want to look at it from the Mongols' perspective. I did want to do that, but I also wanted to look at it from everyone else's perspective too. So looking at the history of the Mongol invasions, particularly in the Middle East, from the perspective of everyone, or as many people as possible, involved in the wars and trading agreements and diplomacy being conducted at the time.
Great.
Sure. The main thing is the books about the Mongol invasions into the Middle East in the 13th century. But more than anything else, I wanted people to start thinking about world events, historical events, from lots of different sides. So everyone has their own view. This is what I think. This is what I think's happening. Yeah. But to look at it from lots and lots of different perspectives, because I think that what pushes world events forward is the sort of collision, the meeting of everyone's different ideas and what they want to achieve, and then events move forward as a result of that. So it's combining all these things. But also there's so much happening in the 13th century that will change the future. And the Mongols play an important part in that. Technologies, empires fall, empires rise, the building blocks of many aspects of the modern era are laid hundreds of years ago in the events of the Mongol conquests.
Fantastic. You may know that Mongolia was under Soviet Union's influence for more than 70 years. During that time, you may not believe that. So all the Mongol people are not allowed to mention the name of the Genghis Khan, about the Mongol Empire. So all the brainwashing was being held by the Communist Party. But after the revolution in democracy and open market economy, so everything has become free and open and transparent. And in that sense, did you uncover any lesser known historical figures whose stories deserve more attention when you're doing the research and writing this book?
Yeah, lots, both Mongols and people who interacted with the Mongols. But within the Mongol Empire, an individual that I thought was particularly interesting, not well known at all, is the Mongols' regional governor in the Middle East called Baizhou.
Yes.
And he played a very important role in extending the Mongols' conquests in the Middle East and then imposing Mongol control. And he's a very interesting individual because he's conducting the transition from being an invader and a conqueror to establishing a permanent fixed authority. So, yeah, there are lots of interesting figures who aren't well known from this era.
In your opinion, what were the Mongols' secret, not only to conquer the world, especially in the Middle East and that region, and specifically I'm keen to know and hear your opinion about the Mongols, the management, strategy, communications, and also the implementations at that time?
Yeah, so throughout history, there have been many invasions out of the Central Asian steppe region and the northern Eurasia by nomadic peoples. The Seljuk Turks would be an example, going back further than that, the Hunnic peoples of the 5th century. And there are various strengths that nomadic peoples had at this time. If you raise your children to shoot, if you raise them to ride, if you raise them to be very tough and to be able to cope for long marches with very little food, these are military strengths. And the various societies around the borders of the Central Asian steppe region, which are mostly agricultural, these are farming families. They don't have the same military strengths. So for thousands of years, Central Asian nomadic peoples have had these basic strengths, which have made them dominant, particularly in military affairs. But the Mongols went one step higher than that. They were incredibly effective. Genghis Khan's leadership and just his sheer determination, he kept going. He never stopped. He wasn't always victorious, although he was victorious a lot, but he just never stopped. If he was defeated, he came back the next year. So there is a very strong strength of personality there, which saw the empire expand dramatically, of course, bringing about enormous loss of life in the process. But I think the thing that I keep coming back to when I think about the Mongols' strengths is their ability to learn. When they conquer a new area, they don't just conquer it. They look at the strengths in that area. What can we use here? And then they use and they adapt, and then they change, and then they do it again. And they do it again until they become more and more effective. And by the time that if you win one battle, your soldiers are encouraged. If you win 2 or 3 battles, they're even more encouraged, and you've learned from your people you've defeated. When you've won 40 victories and you've learned from everyone, you're becoming unstoppable. And so when the Mongols said by the sort of 1230s, 1240s that they were embarked in a global conquest, planetary conquest, actually there were plenty of people who thought this may well actually be the case, because no one was stopping them anywhere.
Interesting. And so can you elaborate on that duality? Still many people argue on this issue now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a controversial issue,
Yeah.
of course, even today, as you say. And I think in my book I say both.
Yeah.
The Mongol invasions resulted in enormous loss of life. When the Mongols conquered a town, they would put a spear in the center of the town for every 1,000 people they've killed. So there is an enormous loss of life here. But there is a bigger picture as well. The Mongols are interested in science and learning and intellectual endeavor. In the Middle East, they established research institutions. There's one at Moraga, and significant scientific advances were made there, particularly in trigonometry, so in mathematics.
Yeah.
That's a very famous one. But as you say, also in trade, the Mongol Empire, not just the empire itself, but its bigger trading network, that stretched from Southeast Asia all the way across to the borders of Syria and Eastern Europe. And so merchants could bring goods all the way across the continent, not all the time, but sometimes. And that resulted in some incredible exchanges in commerce. And of course, the Mongols were very interested in commerce. They encouraged merchants a lot. So yeah, there's a lot of development there. One of the things, though, that gets missed sometimes is the Mongols' role, not necessarily intentional, in spreading people's knowledge horizons, how much they knew about the wider world. And certainly for Western Europe, they had no idea what lay much beyond the Middle East. And so in many cases, their emissaries and diplomats they send out to Karakorum and other parts of the Mongol Empire, they are going to these places for the first time. And of course, the other way around. The Mongols are sending out ambassadors to strange and distant places like Western Europe. And their ambassadors are bringing back reports about these places that they know nothing about. So knowledge is being shared going both ways. And I think one of my favourite stories, it's about the Mongols and the Mamluk Empire, which is an Egyptian empire. And the Mongol ambassadors say to the Egyptian ambassadors, "We've heard about Egypt. Isn't there a big river in Egypt?" So the Egyptians say, "Well, yes, there's a big river. It's the River Nile." And the Mongols say, "Yes, isn't there an enormous bone that's used as a bridge in the River Nile?" And the Mamluk ambassadors say, "Well, they haven't seen the bridge." They're very diplomatic. But what we're looking at, I think, here is people who before that had heard rumours, they'd heard stories, but they weren't quite sure. By going out, diplomats and traders are testing the legends they've heard against the reality, and they're learning more. So the Mongols learn more about Egypt. Western Europeans learn more about the Mongols, and lots of other societies across Eurasia are engaging more with each other through this process. So suddenly the continent becomes a much more connected place as a result.
Fantastic. Presence affect the Crusader states in the Middle East and also in Europe, and their relationship with the Muslim powers, and as well as Buddhism and the shamanism effect. Did you see when you're doing this research, and what do you think about the Pax Mongolica and diversity and religious freedom? Because a few months ago, the Roman Pope visited Mongolia. He's especially highlighted this Pax Mongolica and religious freedom and diversity about the Mongol Empire.
Sure. So before the Mongols, the Middle East was divided between lots of different sultanates, empires, emirates, kingdoms, principalities. It's a very complex mosaic of different territories. And some were Muslim, some were Western European Christian, some were Middle Eastern Christian. And they're all conducting diplomacy and trade. It's a complicated environment. And then the Mongol invasions conquer the greater part of that, until there's really only two areas that are not under Mongol control. One of them is the Mamluk Empire in Egypt, and the other is the Crusader states. And so by this point, the Mongols conquer Baghdad with an enormous loss of life in 1258, and then they advance into Syria in 1260. Now, the Crusader states, they think they're next. They think that they're going to be invaded.
Crusader states is nowadays which territory?
That would be, so the eastern part of the Mediterranean is the coastal strip.
Okay.
So from, the borders of Egypt in the south up to the borders of Turkey in the north.
Okay.
It's a very narrow bit, just all the way along the coast. And they haven't got the strength to fight the Mongols, not really. The Mongol army in the Middle East, it could put together as many as 100,000 troops. They could probably manage 6,000 on a good day. So they're not going to be able to fight the Mongols. So they're very worried. They do fortify their castles. They do prepare as much as they can, but they know they can't survive against a Mongol invasion. So they try and negotiate with the Mongols diplomatically, but it's not going to be long until they're overthrown. It's really only the Mamluk Empire in Egypt which sends out an army, not a very big army, about 12,000 troops. And it sends its 12,000 troops against the enormous Mongol army. And even in the Mamluk army, they were saying, this is not going to work. We haven't got enough soldiers. But for the Mamluks, events worked out well for them, because much of the Mongol army withdrew directly before their attack back towards the east, because the great Khan in Mongolia had died, leaving only a small number of troops in the Middle East itself. And the Mamluks met and defeated that Mongol force. And so the Crusaders were saved at that moment, at least, from an invasion, because the Mamluks defeated that Mongol garrison. But in the north of the Crusader states, one of the smaller ones, called the Principality of Antioch, that did formally submit to the Mongols, so it became a Mongol tributary state.
Very interesting. Was effect on the Middle and Near East, and how did the Mongol invasions reshape the political and economic structures in the region, and actually what lessons can modern policymakers and strategists draw from the Mongols?
That's a good question. Of course, many empires, sultanates were overthrown by the Mongols, and so it's interesting to see which powers rose up at this same time.
Yeah.
And it's notable that there is a family that is forced to move westwards to avoid the Mongols. And it travelled into what we would call Turkey today. And it was a Turkmen family, so a nomadic family. And it began to work with other Turkmen groups in the western part of Turkey, creating a small state, and then expanding out from there. But the family originally moved to the area to avoid the Mongols. And that family was called the Ottomans. So the origins of the Ottoman Empire lies in many ways in the war zone of modern day Turkey, as it would be, with this family rising to power as a result of this very sort of complicated and chaotic landscape in the area. In Egypt, I've mentioned a couple of times the Mamluk Empire. Well, the Mamluk Empire was formed by large numbers of enslaved people who had been conquered when the Mongol armies moved through northern Eurasia, so what there would be sort of Russia and the Ukraine, that sort of region. And then these people were sold in the Crimea and sent down to Egypt, where they became Mamluk warriors, so warriors in the Egyptian army, and eventually they rose up and took power for themselves. But it's interesting to see that these two powers that grew rapidly in this time, they are both being formed from displaced people who had been displaced in some way or another by the Mongols. So that's one thing. But there is another thing here too, which is when a region is being invaded by a power they can't stop, you have to ask who survives in that environment, who falls, who survives. Now, a lot of the states that try and resist the Mongols, what they do is what might seem very logical to us. They hear the Mongols are advancing, so they gather information. The Mongols get a bit closer and send a diplomat saying, you need to submit to us or we will invade. So they refuse to submit, but they're gathering information, they build up their defences. The Mongols move up to the frontier, they raise their army. The Mongols invade, they try and defend themselves. Now, this makes sense to us. It's a logical way to respond. It's step by step. They all get defeated, all of them. The people who survive do something very different. Some states, an obvious example being the Kingdom of Silesia, submits to the Mongols long before it needs to. The Mongols aren't even close, and they submit. The Mamluk Empire acts against the Mongols with extreme aggression. It doesn't wait for the Mongols to it attacks immediately, and it attacks into Mongol territory. And I find it very interesting that we live in a world where moderate, carefully staged decisions, we see these as good, and extreme decisions, which seem overreactions, they're viewed as bad. But it's the overreactions that work in the Middle East. And I wonder if, as the world moves into a more disordered and sadly a more chaotic state, I hope it won't, but I think there's a lot of people who are worried it will. Maybe we need to rethink the way that decisions are made, because in times of peace, decisions that work don't work in the same way as they do in times of trouble. I don't know.
Okay, my next question would be the identity. However, you've never been in Mongolia yet, but you have the extensive knowledge about the Mongolia's past. And if it's not uncomfortable, I would like to ask that how do you see the modern Mongolia's identity, and what do you think? What is it, and what it should be?
Yeah. So, as you said, I've never been, but I've always taken a very strong interest in Mongolia, and the reports I hear are all, well, many of them are very positive. Economic growth, bit greater engagement with the world. It sounds like there's a lot of really good things going on. I think that the main thing is that when I look at Mongolian society, not so much in the era of Genghis Khan, but in other periods, Mongolian culture, society, the way they view the world, it's very different to the way I was brought up, for example. It's a different way of thinking about the world. It's a different way of thinking about treating other people and engaging with the environment. And I think that that's something positive. I think that there's something we can share there. And our differences in value, perhaps we can learn from Mongolia, and perhaps there are things that Mongolians might want to learn from us. I don't know, but I think that there's a positive opportunity when we have such different cultures to see something positive in each other that we can benefit from and share between us. So, I think that there's a wonderful opportunity for Mongol people to reach out to the world and to share what it is they've got that can be of use to the wider world and to receive in exchange.
Then how about the same question for the United Kingdom? And keen to learn from you about the current, specifically the British identity, what you see, and also I am keen to know what are the key challenges emerging the United Kingdom.
There are many challenges at the moment. There are major challenges in the UK. I think that many countries around the world are finding challenges at the moment. And I could talk about individual issues, but for me at least, I think the most worrying development is that people aren't listening to each other enough.
I think it's the same in Mongolia.
You have people at different places in politics and in other things, and they don't want to talk to each other. They don't want to debate. They don't want to share ideas and to say, well, I think this, what do you think? Let's have a conversation about it. They just shout at each other. And they're angry all the time. And this is not a way to conduct a sensible conversation in society. And so my hope for this country is that people will see the need just to view each other as people that they should speak to. They don't have to agree with each other, but it's just that having that conversation rather than saying, I think what I think, I'm not talking to anyone else, I'm just going to shout at you if you come near me. It's that kind of thing. And I think that social media can be very difficult in that regard because it's the loudest and angriest voices that are often the ones that are heard most clearly.
If so, then what should be the shared value of the humanity on these modern days? Regardless, British, Mongolian, American, and Chinese.
I think we're at a pivotal point in global history. We, as a global community, we have connections with each other in a way that we never had previously. The mere fact that we can have this conversation and we can talk about it, each other's countries and cultures, that's a wonderful thing, but it's a sign of how connected we are. And we have all this technology, the same technology that's sharing our conversation. And these things can be used for incredibly positive things. And of course, they can be used for terrible things too. I went to a space museum a year or so ago, and we saw all the old spaceships and things like that. And you see a map of the universe, and you can't even see our planet.
How tiny we are.
We're tiny. But I just couldn't help thinking that there's a whole universe out there for us to explore. New planets, new experiences, new places. And we actually have the technology to reach out beyond our planet and to explore everything that's around it. And what a wonderful opportunity that is. Or we could just turn and face each other and kill each other. Because that's what we've done historically. And I think really, for me, the most important thing is that people from around the world, from Mongolia, from the UK, from other countries, it's to recognise we need to come together and the adventures that wait for us together if we can form those connections and reach out beyond our planet perhaps and all that lies beyond that.
Thank you. So this is my last question, and when I read your book, so you highlighted actually that at that time the Mongols controlled and managed the big cities, trade routes, pasture and arable lands, and castle and church directly. That was maybe the key success of the Mongol Empire at that region. And nowadays, actually, all of the countries fighting for it. Actually, they're competing to control and manage these kind of the soft and hard infrastructures. But instead of fighting and competing, is there any synergy among all those stakeholders? What would be the secret recipe for it if we, learn from the lessons from the Mongol Empire?
Yeah, so when you mentioned the Pax Mongolica, sorry, I didn't answer that point there, but yes, the Mongol Empire creates an enormous territory, and at times the various different leading Mongol families fight amongst themselves, so it's not always peaceful. But the Pax Mongolica, the peace of the Mongols, that does create a trading zone. So the ability to trade from China with the Middle East, and from the Middle East to, to what will be today Russia, and all this huge area, and then beyond the Mongol Empire. It's incredible. It changes so much. And of course, Mongol merchants can bring goods from thousands of miles away. That, of course, economically is very positive, and I think perhaps at a time when we're thinking about, where people are increasingly thinking about restricting trade or putting curbs on trade, there is a strong argument to be made for the importance of encouraging trade and allowing that to be as free as possible. But in terms of the Mongols as governors, well, yes, famously the Mongols treated all religions under their control equally. Of course, it's equally under Mongol control, but that is a very distinctive aspect of their governance, which even at the time people thought was very unusual. In terms of lessons, again, I think it's a point I've made before, really. It's about learning, because the Mongols are very interested in how people rule in one area or another. The Mongols aren't particularly effective as rulers. They use local administrators, which works fairly well. But for example, when the Mongols conquered China, they learn about the use of paper money in China. And they can see the value of that. And so they try and bring that to the Middle East. And so they bring out paper money. That's hugely unsuccessful because, and you can imagine why, because if someone said, give me all your gold and I'll give you some pieces of paper. No. It takes a fair amount of becoming accustomed to it to actually see paper as genuine money. But it is interesting to see the Mongols applying ideas, seeing if they work in other ideas. And I think that listening to the way that other countries are run and using things that are of value, that certainly is a lesson that you can take from the Mongol Empire.
So interesting. Thank you very much for accepting my invitation to be my honored guest. And I wish you all the best for your research work and look forward to having more books about Mongolia.
Thank you. I look forward to it.
My pleasure. Thank you. 아, exciting.